For centuries, sailors have told incredible tales about a freakish, furious act of nature.
They are enormous, they are terrifying, and they are usually fatal.
An unexplained force that strikes without warning.
Next thing I knew, we were upside down, fighting for our lives.
A real-life nightmare tailor-made for a Hollywood disaster movie.
You'd think when you see the movie Poseidon that this has to be fiction, that this is Hollywood, but it's not.
It's a mysterious power that cannot be predicted, prevented, or outrun. But today, scientists are finally beginning to crack the code of what are called rogue waves. Ocean waves, one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Driven by storms, they can reach terrifying heights.
That wave is a good 15, 20 feet tall. Easy.
And we have all seen this kind of wave. The earthquake-driven tsunami and the panic, death, and absolute devastation it leaves behind. These kinds of waves are well documented, but for centuries, mariners have claimed there is another kind of wave, an even more destructive one. 2, 3, 4 times the size of these. A single wave known as a rogue wave that comes out of nowhere and disappears before it can be documented. Tall enough to dwarf a 10-story building or capsize a 100-foot-tall luxury cruise ship.
You'd think when you see the movie Poseidon that this has to be fiction, that this is Hollywood, but it's not. We know that rogue waves can build to that size. If you were standing on that deck, if you were on that bridge, it would block out the sky itself. It would block the moon.
Unfortunately, how we know, by word of mouth and bits of wreckage, only contributes to the mystery behind rogue waves. For many years, oceanographers claimed waves reaching 120 feet or higher were virtually impossible. Their mathematical models showing a wave of that magnitude could only occur once in 10,000 years. Now, however, evidence is building that the mathematical models have been wrong. 1966. The sleek cruise ship Michelangelo was sailing across the Atlantic towards New York. 900 feet long, ultra-modern, and with state-of-the-art stabilizers, the elite clientele didn't need to worry about spilling their martinis. But something happened out there. Because when the Michelangelo limped into New York Harbor, 3 people were dead, 12 more were injured, and the bow of the ship was a mass of twisted steel. The crew reported they were struck by a single wave over 80 feet tall. December 1978, the pride of the German merchant navy, the supertanker München, confidently steamed through an Atlantic storm. The builder had boasted that the München could not sink, what turned out to be an empty promise.
The München got out a radio message in the middle of the ocean, and 15 seconds later, she was gone.
After the biggest search in shipping history, only a few pieces of wreckage and 1 lifeboat was ever found. And there was no trace of any of the München's 29 crew members.
It was that lifeboat found drifting battered on an empty ocean, which gave investigators the sense that a rogue wave had claimed München.
The lifeboat looked as if it had been sheared off its moorings, as if by a jackhammer, which could only mean that something struck that ship over 60 feet above the sea. A maritime court of inquiry concluded that bad weather caused an unusual event, but declined to name just what that event was. Massive, terrifying waves, their origins unknown, their existence questioned, until one courageous sailor captured the first hard evidence of rogue waves. In 1980, it happened. The oil tanker Esso Longdok was steaming through the waters off Durban, South Africa. The sea was choppy, with waves reaching 15 feet at most. First mate Philippe Lejour was standing on the bridge when he saw a wave nearly 7 times larger than any other appear seemingly out of nowhere, heading for his ship. Near the moment of impact, Lejour captured the monster on film.
That shot of a rogue wave was one of the first pieces of evidence out there to an unbelieving world that rogue waves did exist, a wave that literally is dwarfing this huge supertanker.
The top of the short mast on the starboard side measured 82 feet above the sea. Based on this height, the rogue wave was estimated to be 100 feet tall.
Now, at last, there was photographic proof. They had to sit up and take notice. Steadily, the reports not only began to come in afresh, but began to become accepted.
The crew of the Longdok survived a crushing blow that hit the ship from stem to stern. But 2 years later, the crew of the oil drilling platform Ocean Ranger was not so lucky. Storms in the North Atlantic are some of the fiercest in the world. The Ocean Ranger, operating off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, was built to handle even the most extreme conditions. The 35-story tall rig was the largest and most advanced of its kind. Weathering a 40-foot wave was nothing to the Ocean Ranger. On February 14, 1982, a rogue more than twice that size, a rogue nearly 90 feet tall, smashed through the windows of the control room.
When you hit a wall of water, it's like hitting a wall of concrete. That's the force of the ocean.
The rogue wave flooded out vital computer systems. The ballast tanks, which normally stabilize the rig, malfunctioned. The platform was thrown out of balance and capsized. All 84 crewmen were killed. It was the worst death toll on record for a rogue wave disaster.
It's still remembered to this day in Newfoundland. People talk about it all the time, not only because of the loss of all those lives, but because of the power of a single wave to take this massive and powerful platform and send it down.
Even with so much death and destruction, there was still doubt about the actual size of these waves. Then, in 1995, a massive blow to another oil rig provided the first scientific measurement of a rogue wave. The Dropner drilling platform stood in the North Sea between Norway and Scotland. On New Year's Day, 35-foot waves pounded the rig, rough but not unheard of. Suddenly, a wave nearly 3 times larger took dead aim at the Dropner, bearing down at 45 miles per hour. When the wave hit, a laser mounted on the platform captured the first ever definitive measurement of one of these monsters. The wave topped out at 91 feet.
That kind of empirical scientific evidence was one of the important steps in getting the rest of the world to recognize that rogue waves existed, that they could be this high, and that it wasn't just a sailor superstition or an excuse for bad seamanship.
Oceanographers were able to analyze the wave patterns before, during, and after the Dropner wave, and the results were startling. This is the wave pattern taken over a typical 20 minutes during the storm. The waves vary in height, but still fall within a comparable range. But this is the pattern surrounding the giant wave. From this data, scientists were finally able to assign a definition to a rogue wave. It is a wave at least twice the size of any other wave in the area. A single startling event, unconnected from other waves in the pattern. A true rogue. This answers what a rogue wave is, but the answer to what causes a rogue wave is more of a challenge.
Here it comes.
Using laboratory wave tanks to simulate conditions in the ocean, scientists are learning how rogue waves might be formed. When strong currents collide with waves moving in the opposite direction, the wave can suddenly become compressed, thrusting it upward, forming a rogue wave. This may explain why areas of the ocean known for strong currents seem to be breeding grounds for rogue waves. The Gulf Stream is one such current, and it runs right through the infamous area known as the Bermuda Triangle.
There is a possibility, there's a probability even, that many of the losses, the unattributable, unexplainable losses in the Bermuda Triangle come not from the forces of the supernatural, but the force of the ocean to generate rogue waves.
Remember, rogue waves by definition don't play by the rules. And the wave tank shows they can also form when currents and waves travel in the same direction.
One of the things that can lead to really large waves forming on the ocean is when waves with different wavelengths meet, overtake each other.
The energy of the merging waves suddenly combines, becomes focused, thrusting a new wave higher. Rogue waves can also form when normal waves meet obstacles, such as islands.
You have waves propagating towards this island here, and as they get blocked by the island, they split and they have to travel around it.
The waves wrap around the island and come back together on the other side, stronger and more deadly.
If you happen to be right here in this part of the island, you could encounter a rogue wave.
The Agulhas Current off South Africa, where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans meet, is a notorious breeding ground for rogue waves. Here you have strong currents, opposing wave patterns, and also underwater obstacles far beneath on the ocean floor.
As an example, here I have a simulation of what is called a shoal, which is just a hump on the seabed. And let's see what happens when waves propagate over this hump. This is the sort of phenomenon that could explain why in some places, like off the coast of South Africa, where there is a plateau and there is refraction and diffraction and bending of the waves so that they converge in certain areas, and it could be creating very big waves in certain places.
And there is another condition under which rogue waves form. It is the most insidious of all monsters. The wave that occurs where there is no island, no undersea shoals or plateaus, no crossing currents, only calm seas, and still a monster wave rises up without warning.
I never really believed in rogue waves before. It was something that we would joke about on the bridge of ships. If somebody would slip over the side or something, we joked that, oh, rogue wave, and that's what happened. But now I've changed my point of view.
Rogue waves happen even in calm seas, and in some cases, they're generated by storms hundreds of miles away, pushed and whipped by huge winds. These waves will build up to incredible height, and then as they move out of the storm, continue on, even across a calm sea, to strike someone out of nowhere.
November 4th, 2000, Point Arguello, California. Just such a swell generated by a distant storm slipped silently through calm Pacific waters toward the research vessel Ballena. The Ballena was built to handle rough seas, and Mark Pickett was a 20-year veteran of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
It was a flat, calm, beautiful day off the Central California coast, and I certainly would have never expected that I would run into such a large rogue wave, and it would change my life.
The captain's assessment of the wave might have gone down as another tall tale from an inexperienced sailor, but Pickett had impeccable credentials.
I operate research ships for NOAA, and I'm also a scientist. I have a PhD in oceanography, so I also do science for NOAA.
Also on board the 60-foot vessel with Captain Pickett were scientist Dr. Guy Cochran and electronics technician Michael Boyne. The usually turbulent waters were calm. The wind was at 10 knots with only 4-foot swells.
I had both doors to the bridge wide open, and I had just taken off my flotation jacket because it was getting warm. When I looked out the port window, saw a large wave coming our way, and I turned the boat into the wave and punched the throttles. And I absolutely expected that I should be able to punch through this wave or ride over this wave.
But at 20 feet, the rogue wave was 5 times larger than any other wave in the surrounding area. And the speed with which it hit didn't leave any time for maneuvering.
I hit it about a 30-degree angle, and it picked up the bow of the boat, and it flipped and twisted at the same time. In an instant, we were upside down, and the ship filled with water.
Pickett's fellow crew members were below deck, underwater, struggling to get out. The bridge doors were wedged shut by the wave's impact.
I kept trying to push it open, and I, of course, was panicking as I wanted to get out of there and I was running out of breath.
By sheer will, the 3 men eventually made it out and into a small life raft.
It's amazing power in the ocean for something just to come out of nowhere and completely destroy a 60-foot boat in a matter of seconds.
After incidents like Mark Pickett's trained observations about the rogue that destroyed his research ship, the scientific community accelerated their efforts. Could similar freak waves explain some of the great unexplained shipwrecks of the past? Could the mythology of the ancient mariners have a basis in the reality of rogue waves?
In the past, you're sailing along in a small wooden vessel, and suddenly this massive wall of water comes along, and if you live through the experience, you have to have been filled with a superstitious awe and a fear. What could have created this? This is where the idea of the sea monster comes from. Some creature from the depths, smacking the ocean with its tail, moving in a vast amount of water with the bulk of its monstrous form. This is what made rogue waves in the minds of ancient mariners.
When you start looking for clues through marine history, you find them.
Naval architects studying ship disasters between 1969 and 1994 found that during those 25 years, 60 supercarriers went down due to sudden flooding. On closer study, it was determined that more than a third of the sinkings were probably caused by rogue waves. To try to head off new disasters, scientists needed to figure out the frequency and location of rogue wave strikes. Monitoring the world's oceans was virtually an impossible task until the early 1990s, when the European Space Agency launched twin Earth observation radar satellites, ERS-1 and 2. With satellite technology, international research facilities can precisely pinpoint a particular part of the ocean and map wave activity under any conditions.
This satellite is a radar satellite, therefore it has the capability of imaging the sea surface even at night and through the clouds. So that is very important if you want to see very high waves, you want to be watching the sea surface in storms, and so therefore a radar satellite is the optimum instrument to do that. And then we use these images and translate them into sea surface height, and we investigate the wavelengths, the crest lengths, the steepness of the wave, and the maximum wave height.
The results of the satellite research have been startling, smashing the mathematical model suggesting a 100-foot rogue wave is a once-in-10,000-year event. For example, studying a 12-year period of wave activity in the area of the North Sea where the Dropner oil rig was hit, researchers measured 466 rogues. Then, in 2001, 2 cruise ships traveling around the Horn of South America, the Caledonian Star and the Bremen, were both struck by rogue waves in one 10-day period. In each hit, the wave smashed into the ship's bridge over 80 feet above the waterline. Scientists analyzed global satellite ocean data for the 3 weeks before, during, and after the Bremen and Caledonian Star incidents.
Within a 3-week period, looking down from space, they plotted 10 rogue waves higher than 75 feet traveling in the world's oceans at the time these 2 cruise ships were hit.
The largest wave that we found on the images in this 3-week time series were between 90 and 105 feet. The coincidence of the Bremen and the Caledonian Star, that was the turning point for us to believe that freak waves are much more frequent than we anticipated before.
The satellite and radar imaging is being compiled into a wave atlas, a map of rogue wave hotspots, where they formed, how long they lasted, and how far they traveled. In time, the wave atlas will be the foundation of an early warning system, pinpointing areas where new rogue waves may erupt, then routing ships on the safest and fastest route.
If you recognize that you have two different wave systems that will join at a certain point on the sea, then that you can warn for this and say that is an area that is particularly dangerous for rogue waves.
So with the warning from space, we would be able to forecast monster waves within 5 hours or so.
Besides satellite imaging, experiments are being conducted with alternative tracking and prediction systems.
There's also the idea of floating networks, buoys with intelligent computers that have the ability to learn, plot ocean currents, send warnings to each other, and create a neural net, if you will, floating on the sea to send out and broadcast exactly what's going on. That way, with that type of an early warning system, a ship several hundred miles away could be told, a rogue wave is coming your way.
While warning systems get more sophisticated, shipbuilders are also doing their part, designing and building tighter, stronger, more flexible vessels to withstand the force of a rogue wave, if it's even possible. What would it look like if a 120-foot rogue wave hit a modern cruise ship broadside? That was the question director Wolfgang Petersen asked the visual effects wizards at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic.
I like ILM for that because they really want to go make it real. Not put some nice effect things together that look great, but this is how it happens. And they study it, and they do it in a scientific way, and when they figured it out then they make it spectacular.
The first step for ILM was to build the Poseidon in the computer. The challenge was to make the ship an exact replica structurally, down to the last rivet of a state-of-the-art luxury cruise ship, 1,100 feet long and 20 stories high, with 13 passenger decks. Then, working with a team of wave dynamic experts from Stanford University, ILM created a rogue wave 120 feet tall. Based on real-life satellite data and wave tank studies, the computer-generated wave was so realistic it provides nearly documentary evidence of a rogue wave hit. This was no simple challenge, since realistic water is the most difficult image to create digitally. ILM hired more than 100 software developers, engineers, and artists. They spent over a year developing a completely new kind of visual effects technology so advanced it replicates the patterns of how water moves and breaks apart right down to the molecular level. Then, to recreate the violent crush of water, Petersen and his special effects team decided there's nothing like the real thing.
The entire ballroom was flooded within a few seconds. This was not visual effects. This was 90,000 gallons of water flying through the windows. Quite amazing.
With visual and special effects artists, Poseidon graphically portrays what could happen in a rogue wave disaster on a real ocean cruise.
When you take a cruise, the first thing you notice as you go on board is how high this ship is off the ground, off the water. They are huge. And then you ask yourself, is it possible that a wave could knock this thing over on her side? It is absolutely possible.
And the damage that the movie wave causes to the computer-generated Poseidon is exactly what real-life naval architects are working very hard to try to prevent. Ships are a crucial component of the world economy. 95% of everything we buy gets to us by ship. And over 10 million people a year vacation on cruise ships. That's a big incentive to build ships that won't be crushed by large waves.
Ships have to be designed to accommodate that kind of force that can just lift a house up off its foundation and carry it away. A ship is expected to rise up over that and just continue on its merry way as if totally unaffected by them.
A 36-foot raging storm wave strikes with the force of about 6 tons per square yard. Most ships can withstand 15 tons without damage. But a 100-foot rogue wave strikes with a force of 100 tons, almost twice the power of an industrial car compactor.
Right now, naval architects build ships to a certain standard. That is, they know the type of stresses a ship's going to undergo in a storm, and they build to meet that and to exceed it in most cases. The question now is, should they build ships to withstand the force of rogue waves?
One of the biggest structural challenges for naval architects is when rogue waves strike high on the bow, smashing through windows on the bridge and upper decks.
Then the windows are hit and then break, and then the electronic gets flooded and the ship can't maneuver.
Redesigning the bridge and its windows to deflect these hits is one solution. The Queen Mary II, launched in 2003, is an example. The $800 million cruise ship was fitted with a thicker forward hull, an enhanced bridge screen, and more pronounced flare of the bow to protect it from large waves. To retrofit ships or build new ones to withstand all rogue waves will cost a fortune. Is it worth the cost?
It's an argument that will be renewed every time another vessel is lost to a rogue wave, and it's an argument that would rage just as it does on land after an earthquake, when people say, okay, we've built to this Richter scale, should we now build for the superquake? Maybe the question is not building to encounter, but finding the means with technology to avoid.
Even with its perils, man cannot resist the lure of the sea and will continue to return with incredible tales of the one that got away, the white whale, the giant squid, or the towering, crushing rogue wave.
These massive waves have been called monster waves, they've been called freak waves, they've been called rogue waves, they've been called ass-kicking waves, and I've heard it all. And it's the type of wave, when you hear about them, that you wish, you hope you never encounter.